Welcome to the Will and Aaron Show. I'm Aaron, and today's episode, will go through and cover the Indiana High School Football Northern Indiana Conference North-South Division previews.
South Bend Clay Colonials head coach Darius Mitchell. His overall record is 1 win, 18 losses in his third season at Clay. Coach Mitchell is a 2012 Clay graduate. 2021 season recap. The Clay Colonials went 0-9. Their worst loss was a 42-7 setback to non-IHSAA Osceola Grace. Offensive single game averages. Clay averaged 3 points. 52 yards rushing, 110 yards passing. Defensive single game averages. They gave up 50 points, 175 yards rushing, and 165 yards passing. Key losses. 5 players on offense, 6 players on defense. Key returners on offense. So they have 2 guys who are battling for quarterback. Senior Marcus Rankin threw for 55 yards last year, and sophomore Jimmy Fox. Both have limited experience. Running back, sophomore Ashton Mitchell, 231 yards. Wide receiver, junior Aiden Kent, 504 yards, 2 touchdowns. Tight end, junior Jeremy Cleveland, 210 yards and 1 touchdown. Offensive lineman, 2-year starter, all NIC junior guard Dominic Mitchell. He's 6'3", 295. And offensive lineman, 2-year starter, senior tackle Ethan Bennett, 6'4", at 255 pounds. On the defensive side, they return a defensive lineman, 3-year starter Dominic Mitchell, 42 tackles, 7 for loss, 3 sacks. Defensive lineman, 3-year starter Ethan Bennett, 40 tackles and 4 for loss. Linebacker, all NIC junior Jeremy Cleveland, 75 tackles, 8 for loss, 2 sacks, 2 interceptions. Defensive back, 2-year starter Marcus Rankin, who has 62 tackles. Key newcomers, they have 5 sophomores, 4 juniors, looking to contribute on both sides of the ball. Team strategy, their offensive system is the pistol, defensive system is the 4-3. Let's take a look at their 2022 schedule. In week 1, they start the season off with Osceola Grace. They were 8-3 last year. The Eagles play in the Great Lakes Christian Athletics Conference, not sanctioned by the IHSAA. However, they do play IHSAA teams: Lake Station, South Central, Fremont, Jimtown, to name a few. They beat Clay 42-7 last year. Home game should be closer this year, but I have Osceola Grace winning this one. Just don't see a 35-point swing in 1 year. For the rest of the season, weeks 2 through 9, I have Clay losing all of them, unfortunately. Let's look at the big picture here. Coach Mitchell wants his players to embrace the grind. He will be looking toward his upperclassmen for leadership. He hopes his younger players are ready to grow, to develop. Coach Mitchell has had 2 years under his belt, so the players by now know his expectations. The culture should be set. Now it's just getting to work, rolling your sleeves up, and getting better. I fully expect to see some dividends pay off in year 3. It may not show up in the win column this year, but Clay should be more competitive than they were last year. Their closest game was a 33-0 defeat to Hammond Central. Coach Mitchell was on the 2002 team, Clay, team that lost to Fort Wayne Dwenger 17-14 in the semi-state. So he knows what it is like when Clay was really good, and he is hoping to bring those glory days back. Clay moves down to Class 3A and will compete in Sectional 26. The questions I have for Clay this year: can you keep the score relatively close at halftime? I think if they can do that, that's a win for them. They need to play clean football and limit mistakes. If I'm Clay this year, I'm doing everything I can to focus on Clay football. Focus on us.
There's only been one winning head coach in Clay history, and that was Bill Huerbringer, 1982 to 1986, who went 49-40 during that stretch. The last winning record was 2010, when they went 8-4. In the past 7 years, they've had 4 different head coaches. It's a hard winning when the head coaching position is a revolving door. Coach Mitchell is entering his 3rd year as head coach, which is longer than the previous 3 head coaches lasted in their careers at Clay. Buy or sell, Will? Coach Mitchell's seat is getting warmer.
So as you just pointed out, Aaron, the past decade has not been kind to the Colonials. If you look at his recent predecessors, some of them were gone after just 1 year. Coaching is not easy. It's a difficult job. If I had to pick one South Bend community school where it seems difficult to build and sustain a winning football program, right now it's Clay. The environment, the climate, there's just a lot of challenges. It doesn't mean that football can't be successful there, because it can and it should. But to answer your question, I'm not buying that Coach Mitchell's seat is getting warmer. I spoke with Mr. Hartman, Clay's athletic director. He is happy that Coach Mitchell is developing young men who will one day be productive members of society. He wants to see the numbers grow in all 3 levels: freshman, JV, and varsity team. And to see a little more competitive play this season. That wraps it up for Clay Colonial Football Preview. Next up, South Bend Riley Wildcats. Head coach Derek Lee. His overall record is 4 wins, 23 losses, 4th season. His record at South Bend is 0-0. 2021 season recap: they were 1-6. Best win, Clay, 42-6. Worst loss, John Glenn, 42-7. Offensive single game averages: 11 points, 67 yards rushing, 40 yards passing. Single defensive game averages: 38 points, 235 yards rushing, 200 yards passing. Key losses: running back, wide receiver, and defensive back James Boyd is going to Kentucky State, a Division II school. Also joining him at Kentucky State is his teammate Elijah Taylor, quarterback, wide receiver, defensive back. James and Elijah did a little bit of everything. 2-way lineman James Pruitt, attending Adrian University as a D3 program. Defensive lineman Zandre Riles. Punter and kicker Ryan Kingston, averaged 45 yards a punt and 58 yards on kickoffs. He is attending Eastern Michigan. Key returners. Offense. There are 2 guys who are battling for QBR 1, and that is sophomore Austin White. He had 401 yards passing, 7 touchdowns. Last year, he's a transfer from John Glenn. And a junior, Bernard Jordan, no passing attempts, 28 yards rushing. The running back is by committee. They've got 3 guys that are returning. Junior Dominic Jolly, 218 yards for a touchdown. He's also a transfer from John Glenn. Junior Robert Nabu, 211 yards. And senior Ethan Witz, 72 yards rushing, 131 yards receiving. They are returning 4 offensive linemen. On defense, linebacker Ethan Witz, 62 tackles. Team strategy, offense, they run the power spread. And on defense, multiple formations. Let's look at the 2022 schedule. Week 1, they started off with Gary Westside, who was 6-3 a year ago. Gary Westside is a mashup of new head coaches. Although Coach Lee does have the upper hand in head coaching experience with Coach Boswell, being in his first season in his coaching career. It's the first home game of 5 straight for Riley. Offensively, Gary West, they've got a quarterback who is a 3-year starter. Has some accuracy issues though. Running back, senior Kamaje Griffin Terrell posted his second straight 1,000-yard season with 1,628 yards total and compiling 19 touchdowns. Offensive line tackle, senior 2-year starter, potential D1 prospect, De'Eric Mister. He's 6'8", 320 pounds. An 80 pass blocks. He gave up 0 sacks. Might be why he's a D1 caliber player. Plus, obviously, his size. Stopping the run will be key for the Wildcats in this first game, and Gary West. Defensively, Gary West has a defensive line senior, Jamari Jefferson, 48 tackles, 29 for loss, 5 sacks. Linebacker senior, Labarian Burton, 65 tackles, 11 for loss. And defensive back senior, Devontae Smith, 43 tackles. Riley will struggle containing Griffin Terrell. I don't think Riley offense is mature enough to go toe-to-toe with Gary West. The Cougars will be victorious at Jackson Field. Let's move on to weeks 2 and 3, where they will face John Glenn and South Bend Adams. Last year, Riley lost to both of these teams soundly, and there's too much ground to make up in 1 year. The games might be closer, but you can go ahead and chalk it up, these 2 games, as losses for the Wildcats. Week 4, Riley will beat Clay. Week 5, Indianapolis, Washington. They're 3-6. If you are a parent or a fan of Riley, thank God this is not a road game. Could you imagine driving that far for a football game? But anyways, Washington has a new coach in Tracy Pendleton. He was formerly at Indianapolis Cal before the school shut down in 2020. He has a very young team, learning a new system, unproven skilled players that are impressive. It's a long bus ride for Riley. They'll be looking to build off the momentum of beating Clay from the previous week. I think this could be a close game going to the fourth quarter. I'm picking the Wildcats to pull off the win against the Indianapolis, Washington team. Okay, week 6, South Bend, Washington. This is a big city game. These 2 programs are in similar shape. When you compare similar opponents last year, the scores are roughly the same. Adams is the best city team right now, and Clay is the worst. This game is more about perception of the program than anything else. Yes, it's a conference game, and it could be a sectional preview, but more than anything, it's bragging rights for number 2 in the city. Now, when I say city, I'm talking only about the South Bend Community School Corporation schools. Having taught in the South Bend schools for 10 years now, I have a better appreciation for city games. There's passion, there's tradition. It just means a lot more to these guys to play a city school than it does someone else. Riley's record will likely be 2-3 going into this game, and a win at TCU Field would bring them to the 500 mark. We're going to dive deep into Washington later, but it's no secret what the Washington Panthers want to do, and that is to run the football. The war in the trenches will be tough. Who can move the chains on offense? Who can get off the field on third down? Field position is absolutely going to be crucial. I'm not going to make a prediction on this game, but I will say this. The game environment will be electric. Fans are going to come out. The team with the least amount of mistakes probably wins this game. I can see it coming down to the end of the fourth quarter. Should be a great game to watch. Weeks 7 through 9, we have New Prairie, at Bremen, and at Jimtown. The last 3 games are tough. The good news is that Riley has most of the season to iron out the wrinkles and get some momentum heading into this brutal stretch. New Prairie will beat Riley. They're just better. Bremen should beat Riley, although it might be closer than last year's game. And Jimtown will also be triumphant over Riley. Let's look at the big picture here. You got a new coach. New culture. Sometimes it takes time to get buyer play-in, parent buy-in. And once you have buy-in, then you can build a solid foundation. 2 to 3 wins in Coach Lee's first year is reasonable. Anything above that is icing on the cake.
All right, well, time for buy or sell. Riley averaged 67 yards rushing last year. Buy or sell, the Wildcats will average more than 67 yards rushing this year.
I'm buying, simply because that their offensive line is a veteran group with 2 seniors and 2 juniors. Typically, with experienced players, you get better results. That wraps it up for the South Bend Riley Wildcats football preview. We will go into a short break, then pick back up with more NIC North-South Small Division football previews.
You can listen to the Will and Aaron Show on Spotify, Apple, Google Play, and YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at Will Aaron Show. The 50th Twitter follower will receive a free shout-out from us on a future podcast. You can like the Will and Aaron Show Facebook page where you can comment on our posts, message us, write a review, and share our page.
Up next, South Bend, Washington Panthers. Head coach Todd Stamich. His overall record in his 4th year is 12-16, all at the same school. 2021 season recap, the Panthers went 3-5. Their best win was in the first game, Hammond Central, 27-20. Their worst loss, John Glenn, 41-0. Offensive single game averages, 21 points, 223 yards rushing, 27 yards passing. Defensive single game averages, 33 points, 187 yards rushing, 68 yards passing. Key losses, linebacker tight end, Braden Hudson, who's now attending Wooster College to play football. Running back, Marshawn Lottie. Key returners on offense, running back, senior, Tyshawn Grundy, 569 yards, 6 touchdowns. Key newcomers on offense, running back, junior, Jaquan Patton. He is a speedster, not a physical bruiser like Grundy, but in open space, he's effective. Team strategy on offense, power run and play action pass. Defensive system, they run a 4-2-5. Let's look at the 2022 schedule. Week 1, they face Hammond Central, who last year record was 2-8. We've already talked about Hammond Central, but they will be better this year. Washington has question marks on the line of scrimmage and linebacking crew. Washington does play at home, so that's a bonus. Panthers senior quarterback Jason Dockery is arguably the most athletic student at Washington High School. I had the privilege to coach him in basketball the past few years and saw him do things that raised my eyebrows. Jason last year was a backup quarterback until he took over the starting job. I want to say his first game as a starting quarterback was against Kokomo. The next game against Jimtown, he ends the season with a knee injury. The last few games, Washington was playing with their third-string quarterback. If Jason can stay healthy, and that's asking a lot because he loves to run and he has to learn to avoid those big hits. Washington's success on offense is largely contingent on Jason's ability to throw the ball successfully, keeping the defense honest. First game of the season, I don't imagine Coach Stamich putting him in complex situations. I think he'll simplify the playbook. If I'm Hammond Central, I load the box and force Washington to prove that they can throw the ball with success. There are a lot of new pieces this year that are trying to learn new roles. Last year, Washington beat Hammond Central. I think this will be a good game. I don't foresee a blowout by either team. First game jitters, mental errors, penalties, turnovers. The team that can avoid those things probably wins this game. Week 2 at Bremen, who went 7-4 last year. Playing at Bremen is always tough. It's a great environment. Washington did win at Bremen in 2019, narrowly escaping with a 28-25 win. We will dissect Bremen later, but it is worth noting that Bremen is sort of in a rebuilding phase, especially their line of scrimmage on both sides. Washington needs to bottle up all NIC running back Lance Moser. The Panthers will need to stop the run and force the Lions to beat them through the air. Washington's secondary is fairly solid with speed all around. My question is, can the defensive line get pressure on the quarterback? Washington has to get the run going and be able to extend drives. They can't go 3 out, or they have to be able to give their defense a break. Last year, Bremen won this game 33-14. I'm giving Bremen a slight edge this year, but this feels like this game should and could be closer than last year's result. Week 3, the Panthers are at home to face Kankakee Valley. Kankakee is under a new head coach, Kirk Kennedy. He is a long-time successful coach at Lowell High School, where he took the Red Devils to 3 state championships, winning one of those. Expectations have risen for the Cougars as they return 6 starters on both sides of the ball. If you know anything about Lowell Red Devil football, then you know that Washington can expect a heavy dosage of running. On offense, question marks for the quarterback and running back positions. This is for Kankakee Valley. The offensive line has the most experience coming back with 4 senior returners. On defense, the Cougars have linebacker senior Matt Griffey, who recorded 77 tackles. Cornerback senior Caleb Deerdorf, 73 tackles, 3 interceptions, and 2 fumble recoveries. Washington benefits from playing at home. This game will be won or lost at the line of scrimmage, as they usually are. The matchup to watch is Kankakee's offensive line versus Washington's defensive front 7. This could be a close game. Who can wear the other team out and wear them down? This feels like a very physical game. Kankakee Valley won't be tested much against Wheeler and may be a little more fresh coming to the Washington game than Washington will be. The Panthers will have played a tough physical game at Bremen the week before they played Kankakee Valley. So how much will the wear and tear from that Bremen game have on the Kankakee Valley game? I think Washington will hang around for a while, but I see the Cougars outlasting the Panthers in a tough physical game. Week 4, Elkhart comes to Washington. Let's just call it how it is. Anytime you play a school that has an enrollment 4 times your size, it's going to be difficult. Elkhart should win, and we think they will win. Week 5, Washington plays at Clay. Washington will come out victorious. In Week 6, Riley comes to town. I guess they're already in town, I should say, but they visit Washington. I already talked about this game in the Riley preview. It feels like Washington will need this win more than Riley at this point in the season. Regardless, it's a big game for reasons I gave earlier. If you're in South Bend, come to TCU Field for this game. It's the battle for number 2 in the city. Week 7, Jimtown. So also a home game for Washington. Last year, Jimtown won 62-16. Jimtown lost a lot of production from last year, so I do anticipate the Jimmies taking a slight step backwards. Washington should close the gap a bit, but I'm still taking the Jimmies, winning at TCU Field. Week 8 at Bowman Academy. Bowman Academy went 0-9 last year. Mark it down, Washington will win this game. Week 9, final game in the regular season. The Panthers go on the road to face the John Glenn Falcons. This is going to be a tough matchup against a veteran coach in John Barron. John Glenn beat Washington 41-0 last year. However, the Panther offense was in disarray after losing 2 of their starting quarterbacks and basically playing their third-string quarterback. I'll break down John Glenn later. It should be a closer game this year. I'm giving John Glenn the edge. I just don't see a 41-point swing in 1 year. Let's look at the big picture. The Panthers move up to 4A this year. They will be in sectional 18. A lot will hinge on the line of scrimmage this year and how successful they can be, and if key guys can remain injury-free. Clay and Bowman Academy, you can jot that down as wins. There's really 3 games that will make or break Washington's season, and those 3 teams are Hammond Central, Kankakee Valley, and Riley. Win all 3, and all of a sudden, 5 wins is very possible. Realistically, though, I see Washington getting 3 to 4 wins.
All right, now buy or sell for the Panthers. Last year, the Panthers averaged 27 yards passing. Washington returns their starting QB and wide receiver. Buy or sell, Washington will average more than 27 yards passing this season.
A lot depends on the health of the offensive lines. They're not very deep there. Success in the run game makes Jason's life way easier because now you have play-action pass as a weapon. If Washington gets into too many situations where it's predictable passing downs, then that's where passing gets much tougher. The offensive line is not deep, but there are quality pieces to it. Bottom line is that Jason must prove this season that he can accurately throw underneath coverage passes and every once in a while connect on deep balls to keep the defense honest. That will open the defense up and create running lanes for Grundy and for Patton. As I already mentioned, there's just not a large sample size to judge his throwing capability. If Jason can stay healthy, I do think over the season his passing will improve. Washington typically throws shorter passes anyways, which I like because then the line doesn't have to sustain their blocks as long. I like Devin DeVries as the number 1 receiver, being able to extend plays after the catch with his feet. So I'm going to buy. Washington will average more than 27 yards passing this season. It may not be by much. They might average 29 yards instead of 27, but I do believe that Washington will surpass that 27-yard per game average in 2022. That wraps it up for the South Bend Washington Panther football preview. Up next, John Glenn Falcons. Head coach John Barron. His overall record is 126 wins to 70 losses in 18 years of coaching. His overall record at John Glenn is 0-0. He is a Mishawaka Marion grad, attended Butler University. Let's look at the 2021 season recap. The Falcons went 5-5. Their best win was against Knox, 28-7. Their worst loss is South Bend St. Joe, 27-9. Offensive single game averages 22 points, 145 yards rushing, 75 yards passing. Defensive single game averages for 13 points, 140 yards rushing, 50 yards passing. Key losses for the Falcons. They lost quarterback and defensive back Nathan Creed going to DePaul University. Offensive line and linebacker Declan Conroy. He's attending Trine University. Key returners. Offensive lineman, 2-year starter, junior center Caleb Spodnik. Offensive line, 2-year starter, senior guard Will Brinkoff. Offensive line, 2-year starter, junior tackle Landon Glennon. 3 returning defensive linemen, 3 returning linebackers, and 1 returning defensive back for defense. Key newcomers. A lot of underclassmen who could potentially contribute this year. Team strategy on offense. They run the wing T. Defense, multiple formations. Let's look at the 2022 schedule. Week 1, the Falcons go on the road to face Boone Grove, who last year was 2-7. John Glenn starts the season with 2 winnable games. Last year, John Glenn won 46-0. This started a 5-game scoreless streak for the Wolves. Boone Grove is a veteran team, and more is expected from them this season. However, I have John Glenn winning this game, perhaps a little closer than score than last year, but still getting the W. Week 2, the Falcons go on the road again. This time they open up conference play at South Bend Riley, who won 1 game last year, lost 6. Last year, John Glenn won 42-7. As we mentioned earlier in the Riley preview, the Wildcats have a lot of work to do. Will the Wildcats improve enough to get revenge on John Glenn? Maybe not this year, but it will be interesting to see how much Riley can close that gap. Week 3, John Glenn hosts, for the first time this season, St. Joe, who was 4-8 last year. John Glenn lost 27-9 last year. St. Joe will be improved. They have better skilled players. I think John Glenn will struggle to keep pace with the Indians, and I have St. Joe beating John Glenn. Week 4, Jimtown comes to Walkerton. Jimtown Jimmies went 9-3 last year. Now the next 2 opponents could be a preview of Sectional 26. That is Jimtown and Knox. Jimtown lost a lot of key players from last year's 9-3 season team, but with the Jimtown system and the staff they have, they are consistent in player development and team development. I see this being a low-scoring game as both teams will be searching for playmakers early in the season. Both teams do not have a proven passing quarterback. This game will come down to who can have success running, which means the spotlight will be on the offensive and defensive line. Field position will be important. I think it's a close game, but I have Jimtown pulling away late. Week 5, Knox went 5-7 last year. Knox's head coach, Russ Radke. Now, if you're an NIC person or a New Prairie fan, you will know that name because he's the former head coach at New Prairie. He has won at every place he's been at, amassing a whopping 379 wins. His philosophy is to run the ball, play good defense. Now, Knox is a 3A school, yet only has one 3A opponent, that is John Glenn. Everyone else is 2A or 1A, so it's a light schedule. This is Radke's 3rd year at Knox, and I expect the Redskins to improve their overall record. John Glenn won last year 28-7. I anticipate a closer game this time around. Probably going to give the edge to John Glenn just because they are playing at home, and I think their offensive line as a unit is still better than Knox's line. This could be a potential trap game for the Falcons as Bremen Lions are on deck for John Glenn the following week. Speaking of Bremen, week 6, Bremen goes to John Glenn, and their record last year was 7-4. Bremen has question marks on both offensive and defensive lines, as well as quarterback. It feels like John Glenn might have a slight edge on the line of scrimmage. Bremen has the better running back, though, in NIC Moser, all-conference NIC Lance Moser. Last year, Bremen won 21-7. It's a home game for John Glenn. Bremen emotionally might be drained after having played rival Jimtown the week before. This could be a close game going into the fourth quarter. Week 7, John Glenn goes to Laville. Laville was 9-3 last year. The Lancers have nearly everyone back from last year's team. Last year, John Glenn lost 14-7 to the Lancers, and then again in the postseason. Laville has beaten John Glenn 6 out of the last 7 years. That might surprise some of you, especially those of you that remember Laville when they were in the Northern State Conference. This is not the same Laville program. In the last 8 years, Laville has won 77% of their home games. I have Laville beating John Glenn in another tough battle. Week 8, John Glenn goes to South Bend Clay. John Glenn will win that game. Week 9, South Bend, Washington comes to Walkerton. Washington is not deep, so going a full season without injury is asking a lot considering the amount of injuries Washington has had to endure over the past several years. If Washington is at full strength, though, I do think this will be a tough contest. I think John Glenn has this slight edge playing at home, and sometimes playing at home late in the season creates a bigger advantage. Away teams are typically tired traveling. Players are physically drained, so that the added logistics of actually having to travel only adds to the physical wear and tear. I'm going to pick John Glenn in a close game, but it wouldn't surprise me if Washington won either. Let's look at the big picture. I like this hire by John Glenn. Coach Barron won a lot of games at Plymouth, and there's no reason why he can't do the same for the Falcons. I'm projecting John Glenn to win a total of 4 or 5 games.
All right, time for a little buy or sell for the Falcons of John Glenn. Coach Barron won a sectional title at Plymouth in 2015. He won 9+ games 6 times. He takes over a program that's been mediocre at best and really hasn't been good since 2014 when Dave Sharp was leading the way. The last time John Glenn played in a sectional championship game was in 2013 when they lost to Andrean 42-0. Buy or sell, Coach Barron will get John Glenn to a sectional championship game within 4 years.
Woo! All right, let's do this. John Glenn lost a lot of players from last year's team through graduation and transfers. This doesn't feel like a quick fix. I don't know what their JV did last year or freshman teams did last year, nor do I know how strong their middle school program is, but there's work to be done on the varsity level, that's for sure. If anyone can turn John Glenn around, it is Coach Barron. John Glenn competes in sectional 26, where Mishawaka Marion and Jimtown are perennial powers. Knox is getting better under Coach Radke, we just mentioned that. John Glenn needs to hope that Marion and Jimtown are on the opposite side of the bracket. Winning at John Glenn is not the same as winning at Plymouth. John Glenn historically has a losing record overall. However, I am going to buy. I think the Falcons play in a tough conference that will help prepare them for the tournament. And now with Coach Barron leading the way, I think by year 4 you will see a physical football team that will compete at a sectional championship level. That wraps it up for John Glenn football preview. We will go into a short break, then pick back up with more NIC North, South, Small Division football previews.
If you are enjoying our podcast and want to donate, please find the donation link in our show notes. Any donation, no matter how small, will make a big difference in helping us bring you better quality podcast shows.
Up next, Bremen Lions head coach Jordan Lieber. His overall record is 42-28, all at Bremen. He is a 2003 Bremen grad and 2007 Indiana graduate. Let's look at the 2021 season recap. 7-4 last year. Their best win was against John Glenn, 21-7. Worst loss, Mishawaka Marion, 48-6. Offensive single game averages, 27 points, 188 rushing yards, 89 passing yards. Defensive single game averages, 17 points surrendered, 135 rushing yards, and 57 passing yards. Key losses, offensive line and defensive line, Brody Essenbarger. He's now attending St. Francis, Indiana. Offensive line, defensive line, Marty Mangus, attending DePaul University. Quarterback, Ethan Nunemaker, 918 yards, 9 touchdowns. And wide receiver, defensive back, Ashton Shively, 456 yards, 4 touchdowns. Key returners on offense, all NIC senior running back Lance Moser, 1,092 yards, 13 touchdowns. Senior running back Austin McKenzie, 485 yards, 4 touchdowns. And all NIC 2-year starter, senior center Zach Schmucker. On defense, all NIC junior defensive back Brendan Richardson. All NIC honorable mention defensive line senior Easton Reed. And on special teams, all NIC 2-year starter kicker Angel Estrada. He went 15 on 19 on PATs and 3 for 3 on field goals. Key newcomers, quarterback linebacker, sophomore Silas Leydig. Few offensive linemen to plug in the holes in the rotation. Team strategy on offense, multiple formations, and on defense they run a 4-3. Let's look at the 2022 schedule. Starting off week 1, they go to Laville High School, who went 9-3 last year. Bremen will be looking to get revenge on Laville after losing to them twice last year in close games. The Lancers returned everyone with the exception of one graduate. Laville's offensive line looks more like a Class 3A line. They rushed for 162 yards, passed for 52 yards per game. It may surprise you, but Bremen has not beaten Laville since 2013, going 0-5 during that span. That was unthinkable 10-15 years ago. With Bremen having more new players, new faces, I'm going with Laville Lancers to make it 6 games in a row of defeating their old Northern State Conference foe. Week 2, South Bend, Washington went 3-5. We already predicted this game in the Washington preview. Washington's starting quarterback and running back did not participate in the preseason scrimmage due to injuries. We're talking about this year. I don't anticipate much scoring in this game. Field position will be important and not beating yourself with silly penalties or mental gaffes like a blown coverage. Bremen has a deeper bench. Fatigue could be an issue for Washington. Washington doesn't have a quarterback that can throw at a high level, so there will be a lot of quarterback runs. I look for Bremen to be aggressive downhill in the box, stopping the run and forcing Washington to pass. Then the question becomes, can Washington stop Bremen's offense? For as much production as Bremen lost last year, I still give the edge defensively or offensively to the Lions, as they are more balanced with their ability to both run and pass. Week 3 at Mishawaka Marion. Mishawaka went 10-4 last year. Marion will win this game. They have too much speed, power, and skill. Week 4, Triton. The Trojans only lost one player from a 4-7 squad. Bremen will need to limit Triton's star running back all-conference junior Anthony Shaw, 1,287 yards, 12 touchdowns. Triton's offensive line is not a typical Class 1A line. Triton gave up 230 yards rushing last year, which is good news for Bremen, and in particular, good news for Moser. Last year, Bremen won 35-7. This could be a trap game for Bremen. Jimtown comes to town the following week. A rival game. Can Bremen keep their focus on the Trojans? Triton has not beaten Bremen since 2009. Will Triton finally beat Bremen? No. Although I do expect a closer competitive game, maybe like a 24-14 score. Week 5, Jimtown. Big rivalry game with the Jimmies. I will preview Jimtown later. If you are Bremen, there are few teams on the schedule that you circle, and Jimtown certainly is one of them. The rivalry has lost some of its luster lately, but it still means a lot to both communities. Both teams could be 2-2 heading to Week 5, so this is a pivotal game. Like Bremen, Jimtown is retooling after losing several starters at graduation. New faces and names will populate on the field, but the system is the same. Run the football, play good defense. The last time Bremen beat Jimtown was back in 2016 at home, 34-27. Bremen plays Jimtown tough at home. I'll prove my point. The past 3 Jimtown games at Bremen have been decided by an average of 5 points. Compare that to the average of away games at Jimtown in the past 3 meetings, and the average score is Jimtown winning by 21 points. So that's a 16-point difference between home and away. Bremen needs to get Moser going, defensively find ways to disrupt the Jimtown rushing attack, limit turnovers, win the field position battle, throw the ball to keep Jimtown defense honest. I anticipate a close game going to the fourth quarter. It should be another great Jimtown-Bremen football game. Week 6, Bremen travels to John Glenn, where the Falcons were 5-5. We already talked about this game during the John Glenn preview. To me, this is a toss-up. Could go either way. Week 7, at Prairie Heights, who went 4-7. The Panthers are historically bad. Last year's 4 wins is probably considered a good season for all measures at Prairie Heights. Bremen will beat the Panthers. Week 8, South Bend Riley travels to Bremen. Last year, Bremen won this game 48-21. If this game was earlier in the season, I would have less hesitation on picking Bremen to win. But given it's Week 8, Riley's new head coach by now will be in better sync with his players and so on and so forth. I think Riley will close the gap this season with Bremen, but not quite all the way there. I have Bremen coming away with the win in a closer, lower scoring game. Week 9, at Southern Clay. Clay is far behind. From a program perspective, Bremen will win. Let's look at the
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just thinking, what game for Bremen do they have or what game do you think Bremen could pull off between Marion, Jimtown, or John Glenn?
What game could Bremen pull off between Marion, Jimtown, or John Glenn? If I had to pick one of those 3, I would have to pick John Glenn because I think they're probably the weakest of those 3.
Yeah.
Okay, it's time for the big picture. Bremen needs to rebuild their offensive and defensive lines. It might take a few games for new quarterback Silas Layden to break into varsity shape. Coach Leeper is leaning on his seniors and returners for leadership. Need to be consistent on offense and move the chains, improve in the red zone. Defensively, force turnovers and win on third down. The last 3 regular season games will help Bremen build momentum into the playoffs. Bremen is projected to win 6 or 7 games, depending on the sectional draw. Obviously, they need to avoid Andran and also avoid Laville.
All right, time for some buy or sell with Bremen. All NIC honorable mention running back Lance Moser ran for 1,092 yards. Given the O-line is going through some changes and a brand new QB, buy or sell that Moser can run more than his average last season.
So Bremen historically runs the ball more than they pass. I think everybody knows that. Of course, you could say that about most school teams, or most small school teams. Early in Coach Leeper's career at Bremen, the Lions were fairly balanced offensively, rushing and passing. Since they moved out of the Northern State Conference into the Northern Indiana Conference, the production has dropped, and they have leaned more on the running game, 2/3 run, 1/3 pass. I don't know what this new quarterback Silas can do. The running game will depend on how the offensive line blocks. Lance has an opportunity to do something that has not been done in a while at Bremen, and that's to produce back-to-back 1,000-yard rushing campaigns. Early on, I imagine Bremen will rely on the running attack to allow Silas to build confidence. Teams early on will stack the line of scrimmage and test his arm. Even though I think Lance will have more carries early on, I think he will have a slow start as Bremen faces stiffer competition with the likes of Laville, Marion, Jimtown, maybe throw in Washington in there too. But the back end of the schedule lightens up, and that's where I think Moser picks up the pace. Bremen needs to avoid Andran and Laville in the sectional bracket. If they can get a favorable sectional draw, then Bremen should make it to the sectional championship game, and then adding 2 additional games to the season. So I'm going to buy that he's going to rush for more than 1,092 yards. He's a solid running back in a solid system that has consistently produced quality running backs. That wraps it up with the Bremen Lions football preview. Up next, Jimtown Jimmies head coach Corey Stoner. His overall record is 16-7 at the same school. He's a 2009 Mishawaka grad and 2012 Bethel grad. 2021 season recap, the Jimmies went 9-3. Their best win was a 55-27 Adams win. Worst loss, Mishawaka Marion losing 40-7 in the sectional game. Offensive single game averages 33 points, 244 yards rushing, 61 yards passing. In defensive single game average, 13 points surrendered. Key losses. Running back, linebacker John T. Reed, who's now playing football for Cornell University. Running back, linebacker Landon Buchanan. And quarterback Tyson House. Key returners on offense. Running back, senior Sam Garner, 172 yards and 2 touchdowns. Center, senior Connor McPhee. Fullback, senior Connor Watts, who actually played on the offensive line last year, who's now going to be transitioning to fullback. Defense, key returners. Defensive line, linebacker, senior, 2-year starter Tayshire Williams, 22 tackles and 1 interception. Defensive line, senior, 2-year starter Connor Watts, 30 tackles. And DB, junior, 2-year starter Jackson Clapton. Key newcomers, I should say. Quarterback, linebacker, junior Bishop Williams. Running back, defensive back, senior Caden Rogers. And wide receiver, DB Gabe Glass. Team strategy, the Jimmies offense runs a wing power and defensively multiple formations. Let's look at the 2022 schedule. Week 1, Northwood comes to Sharp Stadium. Last year, the Panthers went 5-5. Northwood is loaded on offense. Defensively, they bring back key pieces for a defense looking to cut down on rushing yards allowed. Northwood has won 8 straight games against the Jimmies. This Elkhart County battle used to be a bitter rivalry, but has turned one-sided in the past decade. The last time Jimtown beat Northwood was in 2012, winning 27-0. The Jimmies have had several close losses during the past decade, but never able to get over the hump. Northwood recently hired former Arkansas assistant coach and former Jimtown graduate Cody Vincent to their staff, so that's an interesting twist. Jimtown will need to establish the running game, chew up as much clock as possible by being productive on first and second downs. Have to avoid third down and longs. Need to limit the penalties, ball security, no turnovers, must win the field position battle. Need to sustain long drives without scoring, long drives and scoring in the red zone. But even if they don't score and have long drives, that's not so bad as long as you make Northwood go, 80 yards or so down the field. Northwood's defensive line will have a few new faces. The linebacking core is pretty strong. Panthers have more questions on defense and offense, but even then, the defense overall is pretty solid. Jimtown has to be able to shut down Caden alone without having to send extra defenders. Jimtown needs to stay home, have gap integrity, and be disciplined. Need to harass Lone, make him feel uncomfortable in the pocket, contain Evers out of the backfield, and can't lose track of Payne on the perimeter. Keep everything in front of you and rally to the ball and then game tackle. Special teams need to be special. Jimtown will need to play nearly perfect football in order to beat Northwood, force Northwood into turnovers, then capitalize off of their mistakes and avoid self-inflicted wounds. It's not impossible, but it is a tall mountain climb for the Jimmies. Both teams are well coached, have great kids and great communities, and whenever these two programs play each other, it's always an excellent environment. Let's move on to week 2 for Jimtown's second straight Northern Lakes Conference opponent in Concord, who went 9-2 last year. Concord had a good year. 6 of their players are now playing college football. The last time Jimtown beat Northwood and Concord in the same season was 2012. Concord must replace their quarterback and wide receivers. The offensive line is a bright spot for the Minutemen. Defense only returns 3 starters. Concord appears on paper that they will take a slight step back from last year's team. Concord in many ways is in the same boat as Jimtown with having to replace several key components. Concord's Titus Hackworth, an all NIC honorable mention selection, brings some experience. If there's one team that Jimtown gets up for, it's Concord. You can argue that in the 90s it was Bremen, but as we mentioned earlier, the past few decades, Bremen has been surpassed by Concord, enemy number 1. Jimtown fans show up regardless, but it's because it's Jimtown football. But I can guarantee you, week 2, the Boggle community will show up for this big-time game against Concord. That's how important it is to the community. Jimtown has to get off to a good start. It's the same game plan as Northwood. Keep Concord's offense off the field, sustain long drives, don't hurt yourself, shrink this game as much as possible by bleeding the clock whenever you can. Like Northwood, Jimtown will need to play nearly perfect to beat Concord. So, week 3, we have Osceola Grace coming to Jimtown. Osceola went 8-3 last year. After the first 2 weeks, tough schedule for the Jimmies. The schedule lightens up, beginning with Osceola Grace. Osceola has played several IHSAA teams in the past decade, including Fairfield and Rochester, to name a few. But Jimtown is too much and will win the game. Week 4 at John Glenn. The first road game is at Walkerton. The last time Jimtown played at John Glenn was 2020, and the Jimmies actually lost that game 10-7. I anticipate a low-scoring game similar to 2020. Both teams will have a brand-new quarterback who played a different position than quarterback last year. How many times can you say that, Aaron, where both teams have a brand new quarterback, didn't even have a QB on the roster next to their name. John Glenn's new head coach, as we mentioned, is a tough-minded guy, and his players will resemble his toughness and play hard. I can see this being an old-fashioned smash-mouth football game where field position is yet again important. This is a trap game for the Jimmies, coming off a win against Osceola and rival Bremen coming up following John Glenn. The Jimmies will have momentum going into John Glenn, a team that historically loses to Jimtown. The question for me is, will the new leaders of the Jimtown team not allow a letdown at John Glenn? I think the Jimtown veteran players who remember 2020 will not allow that to happen and keep the younger guys engaged and focused. This is a big game. It'll be a physical game, but I do have Jimtown getting the huge Northern Indiana Conference road victory.
Yeah, definitely seems like a big early game for both these teams. You know, John Glenn could be a little bit of a dark horse, and Jimtown, of course, with that tough start with Northwood and Concord, this will be a big game for them.
Absolutely. So in week 5, the Jimmies go on the road at Bremen Jimtown beat Bremen last year, 32-19. We mentioned in the Bremen preview how tough it is to win at Jimtown, or to win at Bremen, I should say. They have good fan support. It'll be a great crowd environment. I think Jimtown probably has the edge defensively. Both offenses are going through changes. I'm curious to see how much progress made at this point in the season by both offenses. Will Jimtown develop some sort of passing game at this point? Will Bremen play complementary football to help out Moser? Jimtown will need to keep Bremen's stud running back in check, limit the big plays. This should be a drag-out, knockout battle. I can see this game being undecided late in the fourth quarter. It should be a fun atmosphere and a great Friday night game at Bungie Field. Aaron, I'm putting you on the spot right here. Who do you think wins this game, Jimtown or Bremen?
And, well, this is a big game. I think Jimtown will pull it off if they can slow down Moser, of course. But, yeah, I think Jimtown will get the win on the road.
Aaron's going with the Jimmies. Week 6, Clay travels to Jimtown. The back end of the schedule for the Jimmies is manageable with Clay, Washington, Adams, and Riley. Washington and Adams are probably the two biggest concerns from that group. There's too much of a gap between Jimtown and Clay. We already talked about Clay, and they are working hard to get better. With all due respect to the Colonials, this Jimtown game is like when Alabama plays one of those FCS schools and it's over by halftime. You know, hey, let's get the second and third unit in to get them game experience. Maybe there's a depth chart battle going on for the second unit. The varsity game experience can be a tool to evaluate and perhaps provide clarity on those position battles. You know, the JV can work on their plays against a varsity defense. I mean, there's so many things that Jimtown can work on in this Clay game, but Jimtown will win. Week 7 at South Bend, Washington. Jimtown is 7-0 in the last 7 years against the Panthers. Last year, Jimtown won 62-16. However, Washington wasn't totally healthy back then. If Washington is 100% healthy, they might close the gap a little bit, but I have Jimtown coming away from TCU Field with the W. Week 8 at South Bend, Adams. Adams went 4-7 last year. I watched Adams at the Plymouth Jamboree, and the one word that stood out to me, speed. All over the field, speed. And Adams has speed, especially at the skill positions. The Eagles quarterback looked good, hitting open receivers, using legs to extend plays, or scrambling for extra yards. The defense had 2 pick sixes, and I was impressed with Coach Karszewski's staff. The Eagles were organized and disciplined. It just felt like a different vibe, Aaron. And anytime you have speed, size, athleticism, and then you add good coaching, it's only a matter of time until this Eagle squad becomes a dangerous team. Last year, Jimtown won 55-7. There were explosive plays made by both teams. I went to that game at TCU Field. Obviously, Jimtown made more plays to win. For Jimtown, it comes down this year to their offense, in particular the offensive line. Can they win the battle in the trenches and move the Eagles off the line of scrimmage? I think Adams will try to use their athletes in space on the perimeter with a mix of inside runs. Jimtown does have experience in the secondary with Clopton and Garner, so I do have a little confidence in Jimtown's secondary to handle some of the wide receivers for Adams. Jimtown will need to adopt the bend but don't break mentality. Sure, Adams will move the ball, but when it comes down to the red zone, the Jimtown defense has to buckle down and force field goals and not give up touchdowns. Style of play is interesting. Jimtown's a powers team. Adams is a speed team. This feels like a toss-up to me, if I'm being honest. Jimtown's offense will be better by week 8, but you can say the same thing about Adams too. Get your popcorn, your hot dog, and chips because this game will be entertaining and fun to watch. Let's move on to week 9. South Bend Riley. Jimtown won this game last year 35-7 or 35-0. Jimtown will win this game this season. The Wildcats, as a program, are just not quite there yet. The Jimmies typically get better and better throughout the season, and the final score might be a little bit closer this year, but same result with Jimtown getting the W. It's time for the big picture. Any time you lose experience and leadership, it's going to take some time to grow, develop, and mold younger, inexperienced players. Now, if there's any program in this area that can expedite this process, it's Jimtown. They have the coaching staff, the system, the structure, the players. It's possible Jimtown could end the season 6-2 or 5-3 at the worst. Jimtown plays in sectional 26, and it's been the same story for quite a while, the last several years, which is who can beat Mishawaka Marion. They are the top of the hill, if you want to say that. If Jimtown can avoid the Knights on their side of the bracket, I can then see 7 wins or maybe even 8 wins this year, which is pretty good considering the amount of talent that the Jimtown Jimmies had to replace from last year's squad.
Time for a little buy or sell for the Jimtown Jimmies. The last time Jimtown won a sectional championship was in 2014 under Coach Mike Campbell, where they lost to the Andrean 59ers in the regional final. 8 years without a sectional championship at a lot of schools is not a huge deal, but not at Jimtown, given the tradition. And now that they compete in the NIC and Class 3A, buy or sell, Jimtown will win a sectional championship under Coach Stoner within 3 years.
Long gone are the days of Northern State Conference dominance where it was a foregone conclusion that Jimtown will win 10-plus winning season this year. Back then the question was more, which regional opponent are we going to play, and could Jimtown get to the semi-state? I mean, that was the conversation people were having. As you mentioned, in fact, a lot of fans were disappointed if you lost in the sectional championship game. And as you mentioned, there were 2 things that made life more difficult for the Jimmies. In 2009, Jimtown moved from Class 2A to 3A. Instead of being one of the largest 2A schools, the Jimmies became one of the smaller 3A schools. In 2015, Jimtown joined the NIC conference where almost all the schools are bigger. Now granted, they play in the North-South Division, which is the smaller NIC schools, but it's still not the same as playing in the NSC conference. Now a lot of credit to Coach Campbell for navigating the program through new territory, uncharted waters during that stretch of time. We'll say this about the Jimtown football program. There's a lot of tradition. They've won 4 state titles, runner-up twice in the championship game, has a program winning percentage that rivals the likes of Penn. Coach Stoner is a class act, both on and off the field. A family guy, works hard, does things the right way. He's the right guy for the job. Now, last year, Jimtown won 9 games, and that was great. Unfortunately, they ran into a Marion team in the sectional championship game. The Knights loaded the box and stuffed the Jimtown run, and the Jimmy just couldn't score. Now, like any other program, Marion eventually will come off the mountaintop. Probably not this year, but this dominant stretch will end at some point. I'm going by. I really think that when you have a program like Jimtown that does things the right way, works hard, a passionate community, fan base, a supportive administration, it's just a matter of time until Jimtown breaks through, and I'm going to buy that, Jimtown will break through. To conclude, the Northern Indiana Conference North-South Division, I see this coming down to 2 teams, Jimtown and Bremen, with John Glenn as a dark horse contender. The Falcons do host both Jimtown and Bremen. Unfortunately, the Jimmies, both Bremen and John Glenn, are road trips for them. The middle tier is John Glenn, Washington, and Riley, with John Glenn, Washington ahead of Riley, and then Clay at the bottom. The Jimtown-Bremen game will most likely decide the North-South Division champ. With Jimtown taking a slight step back, the race is more open and will be interesting to see if there's a two-way tie or someone takes it outright. Now, if John Glenn beats either Jimtown or Bremen, watch out for a possible three-way tie. We want to wish all the coaches, players, managers, training staff, and marching bands and all people involved with the programs a safe and great season. We would like to publicly thank the numerous football coaches for taking their time with us as we prepared content for this podcast show. Thanks for listening. Please come out on Friday night to support local high school football. There's nothing better than Friday Night Lights. Stay tuned next episode as Will previews the Northern Indiana Conference East-West Big School Division.
Please subscribe and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. That helps us grow the show. Also, follow the Will and Aaron Show on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube for updates. You can find links in our show notes. Thanks for listening. Signing off from the Will and Aaron Show.